how many different ways can you think of how to say to touch in Korean? Now, the purpose of this video is not to bombard you with tons of new verbs, it's to clarify some of the most commonly used ones that you'll see in your Korean studies. But first, if this sort of topic interests you, if you'd like to see more videos like this, please like the video and subscribe. Okay, let's get started. Let's start with the most common one and the most general one that means to touch. 만지다. This means to just touch anything with your hands. So you touch something. That's pretty much all there is to it. Note though, this one can also be used to mean to play with, as in when you're touching something with your hands that you're interacting with. For example, a cell phone. If you see someone is touching their cell phone, we would say playing with their cell phone in English. In Korean, they would use 만지다 for that as well. And again, this is the most general one, so if you just want one verb for saying to touch, go ahead and use this. It'll be right most of the time. Here's an example sentence of how to use it. 그거 만지지 마세요. So that thing, don't touch it. Don't touch that. 그거 만지지 마세요. All right, let's go on to the next one. The next one that we have is 손을 대다, which is most commonly used as just 손 대다 without the object marker. This one also means to touch something with your hands, but only your hands. And in fact, this one can also mean like to put your hands on something. Now, so then what's the big difference? Well, the biggest difference is that this one is the most common one you'll see on signs that say don't touch, like at a museum or something. You might see this, 손대지 마세요, so don't touch. And although it doesn't have to be, this one tends to get used in a negative way. Whether you're saying don't do something or you're saying it in a negative way, like someone touched something they weren't supposed to. So instead of just learning this one as to touch, I would recommend learning this as to put your hands on. The next one we have is 건드리다, which is actually a contracted version of the verb 건드리다. So if you see this one, it has the same meaning as this one. 건드리다 has a different meaning. It means to touch something lightly, or to maybe bump something, or nudge something. And it doesn't have to be with your hands, like the previous ones were. This can also just be touching something with anything. And it has one additional meaning as well. You can also translate this verb as to bother or provoke someone in the sort of way that you're like disturbing them, you're nudging them, you're bumping them, right? You're touching them. So here an example sentence would be 비닐봉지, so a plastic bag. 비닐봉지를 발로 건들고 있어요. So he's touching the plastic bag with his feet. Before we go on though, I need to note something very important about verbs that are shortened into other verbs. And this is one example. Anytime you're going to conjugate this in the 요 form, you have to use the full version. And this doesn't only apply here, it also applies to another very common verb, 가지다, which you can also see shortened to 갔다. Anytime you want to shorten this to use 갔다, you have to still conjugate it using the 요 form with the full version. So you can never say something like 가자요, it has to be 가져요. And the same applies here. 건드려요. Never 건드려요. So just keep that in mind. Anytime you find a verb that's shortened, when you're conjugating it to the 요 form, always use the original full version to do that, or it'll sound awkward. Okay, next one. Next, we have the verb dududa, which although it can translate as to touch, this one is more like to press or to push something. So this one is only used for touch when you're talking about things that you touch and they get pushed, like a pedal or a button or a key, something like that. So usually this one is just learned as to press, but it could also translate as touch depending on the situation. A quick example though that you might see this used would be 5층, so the 5th floor, 5층 좀 눌러주세요. So could you please press the 5th floor button? If though you were to tell a kid not to touch the elevator buttons, well, that touch would be also with this 누르다. Okay, so let's go to the next one. And this last one I've only included because it has nothing to do with touch, but it can translate as to be touching. So it's very different than the other ones we've done. And that is 감동을 받다, literally to receive an emotional touch. So this is whenever you feel touched, as in emotionally touched. And an example of that would be 영화를 보고, so I watched a movie and 감동을 받았어요. So I felt touched after watching the movie. Okay, so those are all of the verbs that I could think of that mean to touch. Did I miss any? Please let me know in the comments below. I do read all of your comments. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again in another episode of Korean FAQ. 그럼 다음에 또 봐.